Now, how about the palettes running down the right-hand side of our screen here? There's obviously lots and lots of palettes here. What we can do is we can take any set of palettes and we can flip through the different palettes that we have available inside that palette group. So for example, down at the bottom here I have layers and channels and paths all grouped together there, and I can simply flip between those different palettes just by clicking on the different tabs. And that of course goes for all of the palettes that we have available to us here inside Photoshop. So across the top here I have swatches and styles and info. Now you might have a slightly different layout to your palettes. Don't worry about that so much if you do, because what we can do is we can start to customize our interface just a little bit, and I'll show you how to do that. It's kind of cool. Now, what I do want to mention though too, before I really delve off the deep end into the topic of palettes, is if you head up to your window menu up at the top, what we get is a full laundry list of all of the available palettes that we have here inside Photoshop. So really what we see on screen here is just a small amount of all of the available palettes. So we have a 3D palette, we have actions, we have brushes and brush presets and all the rest of it there. If I want to go and open up one of these palettes, all I do is choose them out of the menu here. For example, I'll choose info, and that'll open up the info palette there on the right hand side. Sometimes the palettes open up on the right hand side, sometimes they wind up in the middle of your screen. It all depends on your particular setup. Now let me show you some of the common elements between a lot of the palettes. I'll use my swatches palette, for example, here. I'll just flip over to swatches here. Now a lot of the palettes that we have here inside Photoshop have icons running across the bottom. Not all palettes, but a lot of them have these icons. For example, there's the swatches palette icons, or way down at the bottom, there's the layers palette and all the icons running across the bottom there. So that's sort of a common element that you'll see between the different palettes. The other thing that the palettes all have in common is they all have a drop-down menu right up in the top right corner. This is what's referred to as the palette menu. So right now I'm going to pop open the swatches palette menu. Now each palette has a different set of commands depending on that particular palette's function. For example, swatches obviously deals with color, so I get a lot of color-related commands inside the swatches palette menu. If I head down to character, for example, and I pop open his palette menu, I get a lot of font and text-related options inside his menu, right? That's kind of the idea. So each palette serves a very specific function, a very specific purpose. Some of the palettes, I will say this, you'll use all the time. For example, layers, you'll use layers every single day. But other palettes tend to come and go. You might not use the character and the paragraph palettes, for example, very often, right? So what you can do in that case is you may decide that you don't want to have them on screen. So what you can do, and this is kind of neat here, is you can take the actual palette tab there, paragraph, right-click on that, right on the tab there, and simply choose close, and that'll close out of that particular palette, right? I'll do the same here with character. I'll right click and I'll choose close. And that goes for all the other palettes as well. Now, what if I actually want to use the character or the paragraph palette? Well, I can head back to the window menu and then simply look for character. There's my character palette or my paragraph palette, and I can always pull them back. I can always retrieve them, right? So they're simply closed. They're not disabled entirely. I'm going to go and close out of my paragraph palette there. So I hope that makes sense. Let me show you one other thing here as well. Earlier you saw how we could expand and collapse the toolbox over on the left-hand side. Well, we can do the same thing here with our palettes on the right-hand side. So much like the toolbox, we have a white double-headed arrow right up at the top of our palettes. If I click on this guy, what happens is all of my palettes now collapse down to the right-hand side, and I'm left with icons, almost like the toolbox. So if I hover over top of these icons, I'm going to once again get a little tooltip here that tells me exactly what palette that is. So there's my layers palette, for example. Click on that guy, and now the layers palette flies out. He expands out into the middle of the screen, and I could work inside the layers palette, for example. And then once I'm finished there, just click back on the icon and that collapses them back down. So it's entirely up to you if you want to work in this fashion or if you'd like to expand the palette palettes back out, maybe something like this, right? Or what you could do is you could have sort of a combination of the two. I'll collapse this guy down, and then this left-hand edge right here, I'm going to drag on that, and that'll let me expand this guy out just a little bit, so now I actually get these larger buttons with the actual palette name there. So that's another way to work. It's entirely up to you how you want to work, and one of the great things about Photoshop is you can really customize the interface and really set it up to suit the way that you like to work.